What's up, booktube? It's Leah Cooper, and today I'm bringing you my top 5 books of 2019. This list was surprisingly difficult to put together. There is a runner-up because for the 5th book slot, I really struggled to pick between 2 books because they're very different books and I enjoyed them for different reasons. But anyways, my runner-up for best top 5, I really should have just expanded it to like my top 10 favorite books of 2019, but I really try to keep my top and bottom lists every year concise. My runner-up for the top 5 books of the year is going to be Strange Bird by Jeff Vandermeer. And like, even as I'm saying that, I'm like, maybe that should be in the 5th slot. I listened to this on audiobook. The audiobook is fantastic. I highly recommend it. It is a companion novella to Born by Jeff Vandermeer. And oh, it's just so good. I love Born. I'm very excited for the new book in this universe. And The Strange Bird was haunting and terrible. It tells the story of a bird creature, sentient bird creature, who eventually finds her way to the city that Born takes place in and all of the misfortune that befalls her on her journey. And it's terrifying and fascinating, and the technology in this universe is so cool. So if you've read Born and enjoyed it, 100% would recommend picking up The Strange Bird. It's a nice little additional bit of information. So then coming in the number 5 slot is going to go ahead and be Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. And I'm putting this here because I do think it was really well written. It's the first book in the Book of the Ancestors. Is that what the series is called? And I read it because Grey Sister was nominated in the BookTube SFF Awards this year in the fantasy category. Now, Red Sister was nominated last year, but I didn't read it. But this year I really made an effort to read all the adult fantasy books, and so that meant I had to pick it up so that I could read Grey Sister. And I was so pleasantly surprised. And that's, I guess, why it's going to come in number 5, is because I fully expected to DNF this book. 100%. Nothing about it is my sort of thing. Like, nothing about it screams me. And so I 100% thought I would not enjoy it. I'm not into assassins, I'm not into nuns, but despite those are like the key elements of the story. Despite that, there's so much more to it, and it's really interesting. And I don't know, it was so much more of like a Builds Roman, which I wasn't expecting, which is another thing I'm not usually into. So props to Mark Lawrence for taking a bunch of elements that aren't my sort of keywords and turning them into a book that was actually really interesting. I'm not going to put Grey Sister on here because I think Grey Sister suffered from a lot of plotting issues, like pacing plotting issues, but that's fine. Red Sister was pretty damn good. Coming into number 4 is going to be Manners and Mutiny by Gail Carriger, but I would kind of put all 4 books in this little series. It is the Finishing School series, which is a prequel series to her main Parasol Protectorate books. I listened to all of these on audiobook this year, and I loved all of them. Like, all 4 of them are really good. I'm putting number 4 here just because I think for the ending of a series, Gail Carriger really nailed it, and this was like a really satisfying ending to all of these character arcs, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I 100% recommend them on audiobooks because the narrator does a fantastic job. It's about a girls finishing school on a dirigible that flies around the English countryside. And on the outside, it looks like just a normal ladies finishing school, but actually they're training them to be spies and work in espionage. And it's just utterly delightful from start to finish. And it does tie into the main series in a very clever way. Coming in at number 3 is Infinity's End, which is a multi-author short story anthology edited by Jonathan Strahan and put out by Solaris Books. I picked this up I read Infinity War, which is another anthology in like this collection that Strahan did, and I saw this at my library, and so I decided to pick it up, and it is really good, like genuinely such a good collection of short stories. And I wasn't really thinking about this when I put it on here, but I don't know how often short story collections end up on people's like best of lists. So if you're looking for like a fairly hard sci-fi short story collection, this is fantastic. It's all about like projecting our ideas of what the far future would be. Like, what does our civilization look like at the end of like exploration, like when we've already done everything. And it's so good, and there's so many good stories, so many good authors in this. Yeah, I would really highly pick it up. Pick up any of them in the collection though, because Infinity War was also very good. I do have a review of this book, so I'll link that up in the cards if I remember. You can check that out too. Coming in at number 2 is the one thing I have a physical copy of. Let me find it. Seriously, where did I put it? I just had this book. There it is, right behind me. It's actually kind of like a dual winner because I couldn't pick between the two, and that's Planetfall and After Atlas. I loved both of these books. I kind of want to put Planetfall like little edges out After Atlas. I enjoyed the plot of After Atlas more, but I loved the surprises in Planetfall. There were a lot more surprises. So these two books were both so fantastic. Emma Newman is a new favorite author just based off these books. I've got her 3rd book in this series. I've also got one of her novellas from Tor, and I just loved her, and I'm so glad I finally picked these up. I've had them for a while, and I love these. They're companion novels set in a universe where a woman claims to have had a vision from God telling her where to go to find him. And so in Planetfall, she's the Pathfinder, and this is 20 years after she's led a group of people into space to a planet. They made Planetfall, and now it's 20 years after they made Planetfall. She is in the city of the gods, and everyone's just kind of living and waiting to just like for her to come back from God basically and tell them what to do next. And then a stranger arrives in their town, and it sends up a lot of upheaval and just uncovers a lot of mysteries. And then this one is set on Earth, same universe, and it's about the child of one of the crew members from the Atlas who was left behind, and now he's a 40-year-old man, and he's tasked with solving the murder of a cult leader who he and his father were once members of the religious cult. Before he broke away from them. And it's the world building in these two books is so good. I've been gushing about these in my last couple of monthly wrap-ups, and so I won't do that more here. But if you're in the mood for some science fiction, like Planet Small Colony science fiction or Blade Runner detective science fiction, I highly suggest picking these up. And then coming in at first place is going to be Circe by Madeline Miller. So I actually read, I did not realize this, I was looking back at my Goodreads, all the books I read this year to kind of make this list up, and I'd forgotten that I actually read Song of Achilles way back at the beginning of this year. I kind of was thinking I read it last year, but no, I read it this year apparently. So I was kind of I was lukewarm on Song of Achilles. It was a bit of a disappointment. I didn't like some of the author choices, and so I wasn't sure if I was going to like Circe. But again, Circe was nominated in the fantasy category of the BookTube SFF Awards, and I was reading the adult fantasy category. And so I read it, and I could not put this book down. I stayed up late reading it. Like every chance I had, every spare moment, I was reading it. I loved it. I cried. I love Circe. I love all the characters. I loved Daedalus, and not Odysseus particularly, but you know, and Penelope and Telemachus, and just, it was so good, and the ending was so surprising. Like I was not expecting that ending, and I loved it so much. And the writing is just beautiful. It's Madeline Miller's just perfectly polished antiquarian prose, and I love it. So yeah, I know it's a really hyped book, and I think it's worth the hype. 100%. So those are my top 5s plus a runner-up books that I read in 2019. It was really hard not to put more books on this list because I definitely had quite a few books that were just like really enjoyable. Looking back on what I read, I was like, oh yeah, I read this year and this year. I also had a lot of just kind of like 3.5 star reads. But overall, I would say it was a fairly positive reading year, and yeah, hopefully 2020 will be as well. So let me know down below what your favorite book you read in 2019 was. And if you read any of the ones I mentioned, or if you're thinking about picking them up. Yeah, I'll see you in my next video, which should be my bottom 5 of the year. See ya.